Hey everybody, I am Dana Tripiana, and today I'm going to discuss some military stories. Usually you guys see me here on my show Mob Times, where I cover the lives and legacies of the world's most infamous gangsters and criminals, but that is not what we're going to be doing today. I just finished up a 4-part series on Carmine Persico, and honestly, the last part didn't do so great, and I'm pretty upset about it. But in the comments of one of those parts, I was talking to a follower, and he suggested that I talk a little bit more about my military history. The way that he talked about it really had inspired me to make some videos about the military, because I just kind of steered away from that time in my life on this channel. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about it. I'm not really going to get into anything that serious. I just figured I would share a few funny anecdotes from my time in the service. And since I'm taking a week or two off from putting out my long form videos, I figured this was the perfect time. We'll see how these 10, 20-minute videos do, and if they do okay and people are somewhat interested, I've got a kabillion stories to tell. If not, just go right back to Mob Times, okay? Since we're talking about the military, let's talk a little bit about what it took to get me into the military and how I made the decision to join the military in the first place. When I decided to join, I was actually the director of underwriting at a finance company on Wall Street, so I was doing okay for myself. I was living in Queens, I was commuting to work. That sucked. The commute from Queens to Wall Street is not fun. I've mentioned a few times before that I was having a lot of issues with grieving my best friend that died, and I was in a relationship with my then boyfriend for about 5 years. He was jumping job to job after leaving the finance industry, and when he left the 4th job, he talked to his friend, and his friend had a husband who was in the Marines. We talked about him going into the service and me staying behind because I couldn't work anywhere but New York. So if he left New York and I had to go to him, I wasn't working. Every finance company that makes any kind of significant money is in New York. And I was making a 6-figure salary. I was very successful. I was at the same company for 5 years. But I also knew that I didn't want to be apart from him for a whole year that he'd be in training, and I didn't know what was going to happen after that. But if I followed him to his duty station, I would end up having to be a stay-at-home wife because I couldn't work if I wasn't in New York. This is pre-COVID times. There's no such thing as online working. Now, he is totally cool with that. You want to be a stay-at-home wife? Cool, do that. But it took one time of him saying, well, if I'm going to work every day and make the money, it's not crazy for me to expect a hot meal on the table every night. For me to nope the fuck out of that idea. That idea, thrown in the trash, never going to happen. I talked to my mom about it every day, and finally, she just suggested that I join the military as well. She said I would go back to school and get my degree for free, and she discussed the honor in it all. She just legit talked me into it. So my decision was made. I was going into the military. We reached out to a recruiter in Queens and got the process started to join the military. Honestly, the whole process was a really long one, and it was a pretty crazy one. One of the first things I had to do was take the 𝐉𝐻. The 𝐉𝐻 is a test that tests your knowledge on everything from math to science to technology, everything. There's a part on this test for tools and engines and stuff. And that was the hardest for me because I'm an office person. I've always been an office person. I never did any of that tool shit, but at the end of the day, I wasn't useless. I knew how to change a tire. I could fix things with screwdrivers, all that. But I also wasn't a grease monkey, so I didn't know how I was going to do on this test. So I turned to Amazon. I went on Amazon and I got this little set of flashcards that help you practice for the 𝐉𝐻. It has all the categories that the 𝐉𝐻 has, and those flashcards were my saving grace. I don't know what I would have done. I would have failed the shit out of that test if I did not study first. But because I had these flashcards, I spent a month studying for it. My boyfriend had gone through the process before, and he helped me to have an idea of what was going to happen, and I wasn't going into it blind. So I took the 𝐉𝐻 and I did really well. That's super helpful because a lot of MOSs require a certain 𝐉𝐻 score to get that MOS. And MOS is just the job that you do in the military. Now, after the 𝐉𝐻, we had to pass a physical test with the recruiter. The recruiter, it is honestly mortifying to me now. Now that I was in the Army, it's mortifying to me, but honestly, at the time, I had no respect for this man at all whatsoever. I mean, when he took his time to come to the park with us and train us, I appreciated it. I was nice to him. But when he was throwing out ideas for our MOS choices, and he suggested like being a cook or something, I disrespected the hell out of that man. And now I look back and I'm like, wow, I kind of wish I could go back and apologize because like this was a E6. He was a staff sergeant and I'm sitting over here cursing him out because he made a bad suggestion to me. Like, I was a shit and I didn't really know, but I'm sure they deal with that on a regular basis. So the physical test that we had to take at the recruiter's office, the worst part of that test was the running test. You had to like jog from one point to the next in a certain amount of time, and it was a long time, but then that time would decrease each time you hit it, and the distance would increase. So you had to start going faster. You had to run faster and faster, and it felt like it was never going to friggin' end. It did eventually end, and thankfully I passed it, but Jesus, was that a hard test, because I was never a runner. Like, I was never physically fit. Sometimes I wonder what it is that made me dumbly believe that the Army was good for me, because I wasn't a runner. I wasn't into tools or anything. I was just like, I could do it. Why not? And I did it. But yeah, no, I was not into like physical fitness. I couldn't do push-ups. I couldn't do sit-ups. I could do nothing. But somehow, by the grace of God, I don't know, I passed this test. Okay, so now I've passed the ASVAB and I passed the initial physical test with the recruiter. Now what? Now we have to choose an MOS, which again is the job that you do in the Army. The recruiter threw a few ideas at us, but like we really wanted to be 17 Charlies, which is like top level technology, cyber security type shit. But it was decided that we couldn't do that because we couldn't get top secret security clearance, which would be required for this MOS. So now we had to look for a new one, and we landed on 25 uniform. My MOS 25 uniform was a signal support system specialist. Now, if you watch the Army commercial for this MOS, you will walk out of it thinking we are going to be communicating with the freaking moon. But what we really are is we're the guys that are fixing the radios and the computers. If you ever saw a war movie, we're the guys that are like running around with the radio on our back telling command what's going on. We built radio towers and satellite comms a few times. Most of the time that I spent, I was at battalion and I was doing like sound stuff. They would have all like the change of guard and stuff like that, and I was running the sound equipment for those ceremonies. But I also spent a lot of time doing like radio tower setup and stuff like that. Before I even got into the Army, I had some medical issues and I needed to get clearance from a doctor saying I was healthy. So that took me a lot more time to get into the military because no doctor was willing to sign that I was healthy because I wasn't healthy. I finally ended up going to a walk-in clinic that would do it. And I got my waiver and I got in, but that took some serious work. It took a while to figure that out. So we finally landed on 25 uniform. I finally got my waiver. And finally, after a year of discussing this and tests and waivers and waiting, we were signed up. We went to a place called MEPS, and that's where you get your initial paperwork done and you get the last of like your physical fitness testing done. First of all, your recruiter drives you to MEPS. For me, they had 3 guys in uniform drive me to MEPS. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I felt like kind of a badass. I grew up in New York and there is 0 Army presence here. The first time I ever saw an Army uniform was when I walked into that recruiter's office. So driving with 3 dudes in uniform felt so freaking badass to me. I felt like a baller. I'm like, if the next terrorist attack comes, this is the car I want to be in. Like, these guys are such badasses. I'm so cool because I'm in the backseat. So your recruiters and all these people, they drive you to MEPS, and as you're getting there, they coach you on what to say. They tell you to answer no to everything, no matter what, even if it's on paper that it's true. Have you ever had a headache? No. Has your back ever hurt? Nope. Have you ever done any kind of drug, including marijuana? Me? No. Hell no. I would never do something like that. Marijuana? Ugh, I am a good kid, okay? No. MEPS is also where you get all the exams to make sure your body is physically fit. One of the things I had to do was go in this room with a doctor and get completely naked. She comes over and legit touches every single part of your body. She wrote down the tattoos that I had, and she even had me lay on a table and had to view down there to confirm that I was in fact a girl with full girl parts. After that exam, you get put in a gigantic room like a big cafeteria. You are with people of both sexes, and they tell you to take everything off and stand in line. You're only allowed to have your underwear on, so I am standing in a sports bra and underwear with a bunch of dudes and other girls around, and the dudes are in nothing but boxers. There's about 30 of us in there, and all 30 of us end up standing on the line. And you have to do all kinds of wacky shit. And this is the point where they had us do the duck walk. If you've ever seen somebody talk about how they got into the military, I'm sure you've heard of the duck walk. You have to crouch down on your knees and walk forward. It's very strange, but yeah, this is where you do the duck walk in front of 30 other people that are also in their underwear. They made us do a bunch of other contortion shit to make sure that we could. And now that I look back on it, honestly, it feels a bit dehumanizing being exposed in a room with all these dudes and male sergeants putting us in weird positions. It's dehumanizing. But at the time, it was kind of do what you're told or else. And so I was just going with the flow. Actually, my recruiters actually prepared me really well for this, and they told me exactly what was going to happen each step. They walked me through the process really well. So even though, yes, it was a little bit humiliating and dehumanizing, I was prepared for it and I knew it was coming. So I was able to be mentally ready for it before I got there. MEPS took about 8 hours to get through. It was a long process. You talk to the dude that's giving you your security clearance, and I actually got my security clearance that day. My boyfriend, he didn't. His was pending, and that ended up coming to bite him in the ass at AIT. But mine went through right away. So now, when you finish up at MEPS, at the very end of it all, they take all the recruits, and they put them in this room with an officer standing at the front of the room. They teach you what at ease and attention is, and how to stand, and where to stand, and what to do pretty much. And honestly, this is actually a pretty big moment. A lot of the recruits there had their parents come and stand on the side of the room and take pictures as you're swearing in because they wanted pictures of themselves doing this. This is a huge, momentous occurrence in some of these guys' lives. Because what you're doing is swearing into the military. That's the whole point of this little thing that they have you doing. They have you repeat this ethos. You raise your right hand, you swear to protect the country, and you are sworn into the military and officially military property. A lot of those recruits left, and they went right from there to basic. But me and my boyfriend were on the Battle Buddy program, and that made us delayed entry, which means that we weren't sure of what our actual date to leave was going to be. But the day that we swore in, that was the beginning. That was our, go time. We need to get shit done now. We knew we were going to leave any minute. We knew that they could just tell us whenever and they could come get us the next day. So it was at this point that we had to get our shit together. So at this point, it is September 10th, and we think that we're leaving at the end of October. So we're packing up our house because we've been living on our own for 4 or 5 years now, and we're not keeping any of our shit. So we have to pack up our house. We have to get all of our shit together, but we think we have some time. I put my 2-week notice in for my job, and I worked that entire 2 weeks. We had 2 dogs, the ones that we have now, Hulk and Zeus, and my mom couldn't take them because they didn't get along with her dogs. I reached out to Dogs on Deployment, and they found us a home for our dogs while we were in training. But let me tell you, my Dogs on Deployment drive, that was insanity. I will do an entire video on what took place during that Dogs on Deployment drive if you want, because it was a mess. I drove for 24 hours straight. I ended up hallucinating by the end of it because I hadn't slept in a very long time. It was a very, very, very hard drive for me. Now, our recruiter called and told us that our ship date was October 10th, which was crazy to us because we're packing up our whole lives. And he called us on October 8th and said that we were leaving on October 10th. So now we had 2 days to like get serious about this, get our entire house packed, get dogs on deployment drive done. It was a very, very hard and scary and uncertain process. One thing I will never forget about the day before I left for basic is my boyfriend, by then husband, because we got married so we could go into the Army and they would keep us together. Even if our battle buddy program didn't keep us together, our marriage would. So that was our thinking. Let's get married before we go into the Army. So he was packing or something. He's doing his own thing. And I needed to go to the store and get something. So me and my mom went to the store to get whatever it was I needed to get. My recruiter gave me this book of things that I should memorize before I got to basic. And one of those things was the Army song. Oh my God, the Army song is so long and it felt impossible to memorize. My mom made up these little things for how I could remember each line and like how to remember how to go from one line to the next. And we sat in that parking lot for 2 hours while she helped me memorize the Army song. My mom died while I was in AIT. So to me, that's a really special memory that I get to have with her, of her getting like so involved and helping me get ready to go into the Army. It was amazing of her, and I'm happy it's a memory I have. So October 10th comes and we are shipping off. They tell us that we have to be at this hotel on October 9th. We have to stay at this hotel overnight. So now from October 8th, we have had 1 day to get everything done, which is not enough time, but somehow we do it. We get it done and we get to that hotel on October 9th. And we stay, and they're going to put us on a plane the next day to go to basic. When we got on the plane, we were there with a few other recruits that were also going to basic. Now, these other recruits, they told the flight attendant that all of us had just enlisted. I didn't know these guys because I would have told them not to say something if I did. But before the flight took off, the attendant got on the loudspeaker and said that there was a group of new soldiers on the plane. And she made us stand up. And the whole plane turned around and clapped for us like it was a whole thing. And it was horrible. I hate shit like that. Don't have the waiters sing happy birthday for me at a restaurant. Don't thank me for my service. Leave me alone. But yeah, I had to stand up and have a whole plane clap for me. It was horrible. I'm going to be talking about my experiences at basic, AIT, and my duty station. And I have got some wild stories. So wild, in fact, that I have already gone to my friends and asked them if it's okay to share some of these stories because they're really bad. They're really, really crazy. And these people are going to know that I'm talking about them. So I thought that it would be good to get permission beforehand. So if you guys are interested and you want to hear these kind of stories, let me know and I'll continue making Army content maybe. And maybe I'll even do a bunch of different videos about my experiences. I have at least one more Army video I am definitely doing. But if these videos about the Army don't really do well, I'll just stick with my Mob Times content. I'm totally cool with that. I just figured I'd try out this little genre. I don't know. So I hope you enjoyed my short story. Let me know in the comments if you liked this. And please don't forget to like, share, subscribe, follow, comment, do all the things, and I'll see you next week. Bye!